Hello bag builders, it's Diane from Spencer Ogg Sewing Patterns, and I'd like to introduce you to my new sewing pattern, which is the Curvalicious zip wallet. Are you ready to embrace the curves? It's a full written pattern with in-depth colour photos, full-size printable pattern pieces and a complete video sew-along. The Curvalicious is a curved zip wallet with pockets for everything, and it makes a great travel organiser too. It's a fully lined wallet with oodles of pockets. The pattern is suitable for medium weight fabrics, and as always, layers are fully engineered to make it ideal for domestic sewing machines. The inspiration for this wallet came from the Oggettes, as we call ourselves on the Facebook group. I ran a poll to see what pattern you'd like me to create next, and our talented members definitely came up with a wallet, and I then asked them what they wanted included in there, what they'd like to see on the outside, on the inside, and boy, were there a lot of things. So I decided to try and incorporate as many as I could into this design. Now I know it has a curved zip, and I can feel the fear already. I was the same, so I pulled up my big girl pants and I experimented until I had a design I knew we could all achieve. And even though this is a moderate level pattern, I walk with you every step of the way, so I know this can be made by confident beginners too. I will literally show you every snip and stitch to achieve a lovely smooth curve on the zip edge, and the video shows everything in fine detail. You'll be sewing curved zips in no time, even if you've never stitched one before. So let's have a look at the Curvalicious. We have an outer slip pocket, which is angled to help keep your items snug, suitable for a phone or glasses or anything you need to keep to hand. The top opens with a long curved zipper, which means the wallet opens nice and wide to see the contents. Maybe I should have called it the Big Mouth wallet. Inside is a zipper pocket for coins. There are 6 credit card slots that hold numerous cards, a pocket for notes, documents or passports, and also a handy pocket that will hold a small phone or spectacles, a car key fob, secret snacks, or even a Lewis wallet. Actually, it can also be divided to hold lipsticks, keys, small items. Our testers actually ended up naming it the Whatnot pocket. The generous inside compartment will hold lots of extras too. Maybe a mask and a small bottle of hand sanitizer, so you can just grab and go. I devised an overlay strip for the back of the wallet, as it's a handy way to attach a wrist strap or crossbody strap, so we don't need to make any bumps on our top zip edge. This overlay strip and the outer angled pocket are also a good place to use a feature fabric to really make your wallet pop. I developed the sides of the wallet in a unique, uncomplicated way to attach the ends of the zipper to the base that add extra width to the wallet without adding bulk. The approximate finished dimensions are 22.5 by 13 centimetres, that's 8 3/4 by 5 inches. This is a terrific multi-purpose wallet. You can use it as a wallet to pop in your bag. I've been using this one nestled in my Pixie for trips to the shop, but it's large and stylish enough to carry on its own too, with your everyday needs inside. My husband has already claimed this oilskin one. He thinks it's great for carrying his keys, cards, cash and mask to the gym. It's the perfect size for a travel organiser too, for documents, passports, currency and tickets. They all fit snugly and safely inside. One of our testers has even been using it as a makeup pouch. Very stylish. It'd make a great gift filled with treats for a special person. The front and back panels can be embellished however you wish. I added a few rivets to this one. I'm calling that my Rivetalicious. But why not add an embroidery and a plique or a feature print to make it your own? The pattern for the Curvalicious is instant download. It comes with full-size computer drafted pattern pieces and prints onto A4 or US letter size paper. It has detailed colour photos and in-depth written instructions. There is also a video tutorial to walk with you through every step of this fabulous wallet. Just have a look at some of these visual treats from my amazing testers. What a talented bunch. Thank you, as always, to all of them. The pattern works well in most medium weight fabrics, including canvas, home decor weight cottons, waterproof canvas, cork, vinyl, oilskin and denim. The Curvalicious is available for download now by clicking on the link below this video. For this and lots more Spencer Ogg patterns and hardware, please do pop over to my shop at www.spencerogg.com. I post regular free patterns and tutorials here on my YouTube channel, so do subscribe while you're on here so that you know when anything new appears. And of course, members of the Facebook group are such a fun and real helpful bunch who love to support each other, as well as sharing pictures of it their Spencer Ogg makes. So please do feel free to join up. Again, I'll add the link in the text below the video. So, are you ready to embrace the curves? What are you waiting for? Go sew! Thank you for purchasing this Spencer Ogg pattern. I hope you're really going to enjoy making it. You'll find timestamps in the text below the video to easily jump to the various parts and stages. Do remember to join the Facebook board if you need any help at all. So if you're ready, let's go. So if you're ready, let's make a start. The skill level for this pattern is moderate. The seam allowance is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch all the way through, unless otherwise stated, and it is included in the pattern pieces. Read through the whole pattern before you begin. There's a couple of different options on pockets and wrist straps for you to decide before you start cutting out. So things you're going to need for this project: an outer fabric. So I'm using a waterproof canvas today. It is quite a weighty one. It's got a coating on the back which makes it quite nice and firm. But you can use any light to medium weight fabrics, including quilt weight cottons or canvases, home decor weight cottons, cork, oilskin, vinyl. That's a nice soft vinyl there. There's another in waterproof canvas, which is a much more lightweight canvas. I did try a couple in wools, but I do feel it's too heavy for this project. I just wanted to try it out as the testers were asking me about it, but I just feel it's too heavy. It's going to be too bulky in those bottom corners, so stay away from real heavyweight fabrics such as wools and wool tweeds. I would suggest that the heaviest weight or the bulkiest fabric to use on this project is a cork, and I wouldn't really go over that sort of weight. If it's your first one, I would stick with something nice and soft, because the softer the fabric, the easier it is to make. So something like a waterproof canvas or a cotton fabric is ideal. I'm adding an overlay piece on the back in cork just for a little interest, but you can still use the same as your outer fabric. For the lining, I'm using a quilt weight cotton, but anything lightweight such as quilt weight cotton or even a waterproof lining fabric is really nice too, and you won't need to interface that at all. For the interfacing, I've used medium weight fusible interfacing throughout the project, such as Vilene F220 or G700 or a Pellon Shapeflex 101. Don't use fleece or foam, they're just too bulky for this project. They're going to make your wallet way too fat, so stay away from bulky interfacings. We want to stick with something that stabilises rather than adds bulk. If you are using something like a waterproof canvas, a vinyl or a cork, there is no need to interface that at all. They're fine just as they are. We're also going to need 2 zips for the project, a 14-inch zip and a number 5, and that's for the main outer zip, and then for the coin pocket inside we need an 8-inch zip, and that can be a number 3 or a number 5. I've chosen to use a number 5 matching today. I've just put a smaller zip puller on it. 1/4-inch double-sided tape will really help you to get round curves when you're adding a zip in, so I would suggest if you have some, then it's worth using. Some all-purpose thread to match, and if you want to add a name badge or a logo badge, then we'll add that to the front. Optionally, if you want to add a wrist strap, we will use a 1/2 inch D-ring and a 1/2 inch swivel hook, or you can use 2 if you want to add a crossbody strap. So if you're ready, let's have a look at the pattern pieces. So print off all your pattern sheets, making sure that the box actual size is ticked and the shrink to fit or fit to page box is unticked. And remember, do not print from a mobile phone, please. If you need help with opening and printing PDF patterns at the correct size, or even to print them at a different size, I've got a video to help you, and I'll add the link in below, and if I remember I'll put it up at the top here too. There is a 1-inch square control box shown on the pattern piece for you to check before cutting. Each page is marked with a description. Just cut out and tape together as instructed on the pieces, and then you can go ahead and cut out your fabric as per the directions in the pattern instructions. I do have a few extra tips for this pattern. Firstly, cut as accurately as possible. It's a small item, so cutting accurately makes a big difference. Some of these pieces are really small. Leave your pattern pieces pinned to your cut pieces, or use the handy labels that I've included so you can easily identify your cut pieces. This wallet has got a lot going on in it, and you don't need to put everything in there. Just add the pockets that you want to add in or you think you'll use. As we said before, there's no need to interface your outer fabric if you're using cork, waterproof canvas, oilskin or vinyl. If you're using regular fabric, you can block fuse to save time. Apart from pieces F and G, we're going to hold those back. We don't want to fuse those yet. And note that piece D is not interfaced at all. That's your side panels. As I mentioned before, the softer the fabric, the easier this wallet is to construct. So it's worth making your first in cotton or waterproof canvas. You can always slip in a little bit of Decaville at the end if you want to firm it up. Don't use fabrics that have stretch, and that includes vinyls. Just check your vinyls before you do it, because that's one thing I found with this, particularly around the curved zip edge. A lot of vinyls, if they're knitted vinyls, they have stretch on the bias, and actually that causes a problem when we go around this curve. So just make sure that your fabrics are rigid or that you've interfaced them so that they are stable. Mark all the notches shown on the pattern pieces. So you'll find the little black triangles, those are notches, so just make a snip within the seam allowance. The points we'll be able to match to later on. If you do want to reduce bulk further, you can trim your interfacings down by 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch all the way around your pattern pieces. If you're using directional fabrics, the direction should be the same direction as the writing on the pattern piece on all pieces. You can mix and match your prints for interest. Obviously I'm using a plain outer here, but I'm going to use a spot lining, and my pockets I'm going to make in a striped fabric just to add a little bit of interest inside. As usual, backstitch at the beginning and end of every single seam. Trim your loose threads as you go to keep your project tidy. Press at every stage for a smart finish. And of course use a pressing cloth if you're using cork or vinyl. If you're using continuous zip, you can zigzag stitch the ends closed so there's no danger of accidentally removing the zip pull during construction. You can also add a layer of RFID fabric in at the end as well if you want to. Right, that's the boring talky bit over. We can finally get to some sewing. So first we're going to make the glasses pocket. So this is just a shallow pocket I designed for spectacles, a small phone, or key fobs, or in fact my testers ended up calling it a whatnot pocket. They were stuffing it with tickets and lipsticks and even chocolate bars. So grab your glasses pocket piece H. We'll cut that on the fold, so obviously that's one long piece. So open it out, and we're going to fold that with right sides together, lining up the short straight edges. Clip that in place along that raw short edge. And I'm going to stitch this short straight edge with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. On my machine today I've got a walking foot, but you could just have a regular foot on this. You're not going to need a walking foot. I just tend to leave mine on all the time unless I'm attaching zippers. I've got a size 8T universal needle in there. You could use a Microtex needle with waterproof canvas. And I'm using a stitch length of 2.6, 2.7 for the lining, though I'll increase that to 3 for any top stitching. So let's stitch that seam. For those of you who already know me, you'll know I'm the queen of trimming. I don't like to leave a loose thread anywhere, so trim at every opportunity, because you know it's just going to end up stuck out at the end somewhere if you don't do it now. So just shuffle that seam around so it's in the centre, or there or thereabouts, and then finger press that seam open. And I'm going to clip that along the top edge. If you are using a directional print, make sure that your print is in the right direction. So this is going to be the top of the pocket here. And then I'm going to stitch along that top edge, again with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. The reason we're using this method is to reduce bulk, so we don't have seams at each side of the pocket, and your corners are going to be a lot sharper. And there's no need to clip your corners either with this method. You've just got that one little seam rather than 2 bulky seams on the sides. So let's stitch that top edge. Again with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to turn that through. You'll see how much sharper your corners are when you don't have a seam there as well. Don't use anything sharp to poke these corners out. And now I shall take that to the ironing board and I'll press that nice and flat, and then we're going to top stitch it. So apologies for confusing things. I have just turned the camera around because it was looking a little bit blurry and it wasn't a great angle. So I've been to the ironing board and I've pressed that pocket nice and flat. I'm now going to top stitch the top edge, the top folded edge, and I'm going to stitch that at 3mm or 1/8 of an inch away from the top folded edge. You've also got a choice of doing a second line of stitching to make it look like twin needle, which I'll do, and I'll do the second line of stitching 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from that top folded edge. And the second line. So that second line is completely optional. Let's trim that up. Obviously the seam goes to the back. There's our glasses pocket. So now we're going to attach that to our lining, and that's our lining piece A. So that's the larger full size piece, same size as your outer. I'll lay that down flat, face up. I'm going to put the pocket face up as well on top. I'm going to centre it on that pocket but line it up against that bottom long edge. So I'll just eyeball it. I'll clip that in place. And now I'm going to stitch the sides and the bottom. I'm going to top stitch those 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge again. And you also have the option of adding a second row of stitches like we did on the top here along the sides too, just to give it a twin needle effect. So you no need to put that on the bottom because that line will be hidden within the seam allowance when we finish. So just on the side we can add the second one. So I'll do that now. Get it the right way around. I'll add that second line on the sides. Trim that up. See how pretty it looks already? Now you've got a few options here. I'm going to leave it as it is, but you could add a plastic snap centrally if you wanted to, or you could divide the pocket in half to add more credit cards, or you could divide it into 3, which as a couple of my testers did that looked pretty good actually, I've got to say, and they used it to hold lipsticks and memory sticks, bits of chocolate, so quite a good idea too, maybe the odd key. So as I say, I'll just leave it as it is. So our next operation is to sew a line of stitching 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch from that long straight bottom edge. I'm going to sew it all the way across from edge to edge, and that's actually going to form the base of your wallet. It's just going to help it fold into the right shape at the end, so you won't really see it. So I'll just stitch that across now. Of course, you'll find a guide on your machine to help you stitch that at the right depth. And there we are, that's that line of stitch. It won't be very obvious at the end at all, so don't worry if you've got the odd wobble. So now we're going to add our zip coin pocket. And this method is a quick and easy alternative to a face pocket, and it gives a sort of a featured double stitch effect onto the right side of the lining, which is quite attractive. So let's flip the panel over. I've just grabbed a board so it's easier for you to see with it being white. So we've flipped our lining panel over. So just grab your paper pattern piece A, and we want to transfer this block here, this mark, to our lining panel. So the easiest way to do that, I find, is just to punch a hole through the paper pattern with a ballpoint pen or a punch of some kind, just so you've got those little marks. Lay it on top, lining up all the edges, dot a mark through, and then when you take it off you can join it up with a heat erasable pen. I've used a non-erasable pen today just so you can see it, it's much clearer. And then I'm going to grab my coin pocket lining pieces J, take those to the ironing board and turn up a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch hem on both pieces. Okay, so we can put one to the side for now. Let's flip this panel back over. And I'm going to lay my pocket panel right side down with the hemmed edge towards the bottom. I'm going to match it up with the sides of the glasses pocket, just so it's central. You can see the difference. It's just about a centimetre each side. And I want it to lie 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch from the bottom edge. So you can use a quilt rule or a ruler just to see what your 2 centimetre line is. It's just a tiny bit above that stitch line that you did before. So just position that. So ensure this bottom edge is still folded up. Your top corners should not be reaching the top curve. You should have a little gap there. And I'm going to pin that in place just temporarily. Just put a couple of pins in at the bottom. Let's flip that back over so we can see our box shape. So you can transfer your pins to this side just to make sure everything's in a nice position. So make sure that is sitting at the right place. You're going to catch it in. Take those lower pins out now. So working from this side, I'm going to stitch 2 lines, one across the top of the box and one across the bottom. You can do the complete box if you prefer. It's just 2 different methods of doing it. They both have pros and cons. So today I'm just going to stitch a line across the top and a line across the bottom. I want to make sure that I start and stop exactly on those lines if I can. So you don't want to go across the ends because that will mean we won't have enough room to catch in the side of our pocket. So just keep it within the box. So now I'm going to slit through the centre of that box. I'll just show you with a pen where I'm going to slit. So I'm going to slit all the way along the centre. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And exactly out to those stitch marks where those stitch marks end, where my stitch lines end. And then I'll be able to turn it through. So be brave and just snip along there. Take your pins out now. They sounded a bit blunt. So right out to that last stitch. If you don't reach the last stitch, you'll end up with a pucker. So we want to make sure we go right to the edge. Okay, and now I want to push the pocket through. So it does help if if you just finger press along top and bottom. You can do this at the ironing board and give it a proper press. Push that pocket through. And then we'll take it to the ironing board and press it nice and flat. So we have a lovely letterbox shape there. A nice letterbox shape opening. There we go. So you can see that's nice and rectangular. Right, let me go and press that. So I've pressed that. We now have a beautifully oblongy oblong space, a nice letterbox there, just ready to receive our zip. So I've got my 8-inch zip. You can use a 3 or a 5. That's the 3mm or a 5mm teeth. And that's where we get the number from a number 3 or a number 5. So to apply that, I'm going to use some double-sided tape because it makes things so much easier. So grab my double-sided tape and I'm going to apply it to the back of the fabric. If I apply it to the zip, I'm in danger of seeing the tape when I turn it around. So if you put it on the back of the fabric, then you know you're not going to see anything afterwards. So if I'll just put it on the edge here, top and bottom. So take your 8-inch zip and place it face up with the puller to the left when closed. I think that's the right way around. I'm working upside down here. And then we're going to lay our panel with the wrong side down on top. So you've got zip facing upwards, right side, and lining right side upwards. So make sure that your zip is open about a third of the way. I use a bit of sticky tape on the end just to hold it. Obviously you can staple it if you're not using a fixed length zip, or you can just leave it. If you staple it, it tends to get in the way of stitching though, so I like to just use a bit of tape or zigzag stitch the end just to hold it in place. So I'm going to be laying that on there so that you'll have plenty of space on both ends to stitch, on both sides to stitch over it. So let's peel that tape off. If you have got any zip stoppers, obviously make sure they're well out of the way. And we'll just lower that down on top. Make sure it's nice and central. I'll just zip it up a bit to make sure I've got that in nice. Open it up again. You can have a little fiddle around with it. Just make sure it's lying nice and central. There we go. So working from the right side of the fabric, I'm going to top stitch 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the opening all the way around, and that'll secure the zip in place. So I've put a zipper foot on my machine already. Move your zip when you're halfway. Trim up. So that's working nicely. Now we're going to do a second row of stitching just on the outside of that, and what that will do, it will hold the zip tape down on the back. Because we're not going to face this pocket, we want to hold the edge of that zip tape down at the bottom there. The top edge will be concealed, but this bottom edge we want stitched nice and firmly in place. So you can either do it from the back here where you can see the zip itself and you know where the edge is, or you can do it from the front if you're worried about the stitches on your machine not being perfect from the back. So let's do it that way. In the pattern I did it this way, in the written instructions, so in the video let's do it this way. Just make sure you know how far away your zip tape is so you know you're going to catch it. It's worth just mentioning, leave your zipper foot on because it is quite close to the pocket underneath. When you get to the sides, stay around the same stitch line or just fractionally outside it, because you want to give yourself plenty of room to stitch the pocket afterwards. Trim up. And I'll give that another press now, but you can see that that gives a nice effect around the zip, and that pulls the tape down underneath. So you've got a nice tidy edge there. And then I'll trim off any excess zip tape at this point. Make sure you don't catch your pocket in there. Shouldn't really be using those scissors. And now we're going to grab our second coin pocket piece, this piece J again, and place right side down on top of the first. So flip it over. Right sides together on top of the first. You've got your hemmed edge at the bottom still. And I'm going to clip that just around the pocket itself, because we're going to stitch around the pocket but not through the lining. Open that zip a little bit to make it easier. Make sure your edges are all lined up. Again, leave your zipper foot on here because it's only a narrow margin at the top here, so just give yourself plenty of room. So we're going to stitch the sides and the top of this pocket. We're going to leave the bottom open to turn it through. So to do that, we don't want to go through the lining. So if you turn it over to the front and just fold your lining in, you can see just the pocket itself. So if we fold that over, you'll be able to see to hem that or to stitch it. So approximately 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but depending on how far you've gone with your zip, just as tight into your zip as you can and to the top. So sides and top. There we are. So that's our pocket now stitched at sides. And that's ready for when we want to turn it through. I would just put a little pin in there. You can put a pin in there to keep it closed, or you could pin it up a little bit just to keep it out of the way of your stitching for when we're attaching the zip. So that's one side of our lining complete, and we're ready to move on with the second side. So if you're ready to move on to the next side of the lining, we're going to do our credit card slots. I love a credit card slot. So take your credit card slot piece, which is F, and on your fabric, we want to fuse it, but we want to make sure that the fusing is much smaller. So just cut it down by 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch all the way around before you fuse that on. There's a lot of layers because we've got a lot of credit card slots, and we don't want to increase it by 10 layers of interfacing as well. So just make sure that's out of your seam allowances. So place your pattern piece onto your pattern and make sure you have snipped all the notches, because that is our positioning for folding the credit card slots. So I'll show you just on the paper pattern piece first before we get to the fabric, just so you can see it clearly. So here's our paper pattern piece. Make sure you've notched your fabric in all these positions. Ignore the tape 2 marks, obviously they're just for taping your pattern piece together. It's just those notches on both sides of the fabric. And once you've got your fabric fused and ready and notched, you're going to take it to the ironing board and you're going to fold up line A, or pinch up line A till it lies on line B. So you see line B there, so it's A to B. Line C, we're going to pinch up to meet line D. Press that in place. So do all this at the ironing board. And then line E, pinch up to meet line F. And then at line G, we fold that back behind, and then you'll see it comes back down to reach the bottom raw edge of the other side. And there will be your credit card slots all nicely lined up for you and ready to stitch. So always start folding from line A upwards. Don't try and do it top down. It doesn't really work quite so well. So A to B, C to D, E to F, and then fold back at G. So we'll do that on the fabric now. So I have pre-folded this, pre-pressed it at the ironing board just so I don't have to cart you over there. So using all those notches, you can keep the paper pattern piece by the side just so you know which way you're going. So line A, up to meet line B. You can see the notches on the sides. Pinch line C up to meet line D. Pinch line E up to meet F. And then at G, fold it back behind, and you'll see it should meet up at the bottom. So next we want to top stitch each of those top edges. So I've switched out for, back to my walking foot. Actually, I've put a blind hemming foot on there because blind hemming foot is great for top stitching. Helps you keep a constant distance from the edge, and I find it's really helpful. I've often got it on there. So let's edge stitch each of those folds. So I've increased my stitching to about 2.93 for top stitching. There's one. Next. So that's all four. I'll move that board now. Let's trim those up. It is important to trim these because this is the one place I always find they end up sticking out and you can never quite get to them afterwards. You fold it back up as you do it. There we are, good to go. So fold it back into position. We'll put a couple of clips in the side. They do look so nice, don't they? A nicely formed credit card slot. So now I'm going to baste the sides and the bottom within the seam allowance, so less than the 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so we don't see it after it's finished. Trim any threads if you get gathering a few. So now we want to divide that credit card pocket in half. So you can either measure it or fold it. Just make sure it's nice and accurate. You don't want one credit card pocket fitting loads and one fitting none. Just fold it in place, and then we want to stitch along that line just to make a divide. Yeah, trim, trimity trim. So now grab your centre back lining piece E, and we're going to lay our completed credit card unit right side up on top. So we're right side up with both of them. Just line that up with the bottom straight edge. Clip in place. And again, I'm going to baste that at the sides and at the bottom just to hold it in place. And you'll find that that top section there is a very handy place just to add your logo tab if you want to add one. So I add it centrally just slightly above, about 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch above the top credit card pocket. So I'll do that at the same time. So baste around the outsides and then attach your badge. That's what having a blunt needle does for you. It's just snagged my fabric there on the corner. You can see that little line. I need to change that needle. I'll do that in a second. And I'll do that at the same time as I take these to the ironing board. So next we want to attach the lining side panels. So take both back lining side panel pieces G, which is left and right. So we're going to line them up on either side. Now we're going to interface those, but we want to cut the interfacing down. As I say, we want to keep the interfacing to a minimum on this edge. So I've got my two interfacing pieces, but I'm going to cut those down by 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch along that long straight edge. So you're actually taking a fair chunk off these. It's only about half you're left with. So now I'll take this to the ironing board and I will fuse my corresponding pieces, and they will just sit on the edge of those panels, and that's the curved edges they'll be sitting on. and I'll change my needle while I do that. So nicely pressed, we've got them fused on the outside, so just lay them to the corresponding sides. So that's your side panels G, and you'll see that the curves go in the same direction. So everything's right way up at the moment, but we want to flip those right sides down. The side panels are going to lie on top, matching up those long straight edges, and that'll be right sides together. Clip those in place. And then I'm going to stitch along those long straight edges with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Snip my threads, and then we're also going to clip those corners, just anywhere we can keep the bulk down. Particularly these bottom corners, we want to keep as much out of the bottom seam as we can. So I'm just going to clip those. You can clip a bit off the top if you want to as well. And now open out those seams and press the side panels away. Do that at the ironing board, I'll just finger press them now for speed. And then we want to top stitch 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge of the fold down each of those side panels, just to hold those out and in place. It's worth comparing this piece, by the way, to your full A panel piece, just to make sure you haven't made your seams too large or too small. It should be exactly the same size as that original A pattern piece now, the full piece of back and front. So let's top stitch down here. I've gone up, that's the beauty of stripes. It's hard to get them exactly right. That one looks good. So we're nearly finished with this back lining panel now. The only thing to do is to stitch that extra line of stitching along the bottom, and we want that 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch from the long straight edge. So I'm just going to stitch along there. So that's our second lining piece complete. We can put that to one side now and make a start on our outer. So let's get started on our outer. So first of all, we're going to construct the front pocket. So if you take pieces B and C, if you want to add a badge, we'll do that first. I'm going to apply that to the outer front pocket B. A good place for this is centrally 5 centimetres or 2 inches up from that bottom notch. So you can mark that. I've just put a little bit of Decaville on the back for extra strength in that place, and I've marked a dot 5 centimetres or 2 inches up. I'm going to mark the place for my badge. Straighten out my prongs. So I'll just mark where the prongs will go. And we'll slip through that with a seam ripper. A bluntish seam ripper by the looks of it. I'll flip to the front and push our badge in, make sure it's the right way up. In fact, my holes aren't quite long enough. You can put a pin at the top or bottom of this as you're slitting, so you don't slit too far if you're worried about it. Slot it in, make sure it's nice and straight. Okay, when you're happy with your positioning, flip it over and put your backing plate on. And totally up to you if you want to go outwards or inwards with the prongs. You can put a little piece of plumber's tape over that too, just to flatten it out if you want, or even fuse a little piece of fleece over the top if you're not using backing that can melt, of course. So there we go, that's our handmade badge. So now we're going to construct the pocket. So that was our piece B. Grab your piece C and lining, which we'll note is cut the other way around. So we're going to lay those right sides together. And we're just going to clip across that top straight diagonal edge. Make sure it's lined up all the way around. Flip it over to check. Yeah, that's fine. And now I'm going to stitch along there with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And it's just along that one straight edge. Trim, and then we're going to snip the corners from the seam allowances. It's all about keeping bulk down the whole time here, on any project we make really. The beauty of bags, you know what it's like, we like to put lots of layers on there and then and then tell our machine they've got to manage it. So then I'm going to turn that over so it's wrong sides together, and that will form your pocket lining. Now you can match those up exactly with the outer and lining, or you could just roll it slightly so your lining just peeks over the top just by a fraction, 1/8 of an inch, a couple of millimetres, so you can see that hint of the lining. Totally up to you. I'll just match it today. So clip in place all the way around. And I'm going to top stitch just this diagonal straight edge, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I would take it to the ironing board and press it first. I'll just finger press it now for today. Trim up. You can do 2 lines of stitching there if you'd like to, just to give it that look of a twin needle again. Now there is the option here of adding a slim magnetic fastener to this pocket opening if you want to, though it will restrict the size of the phone that you're able to put in it. So bear in mind you're going to be cutting off some of those seam allowances. So I like it open. It doesn't fall out because it's hemmed at that side, unless you're going to hold it upside down, but you can add in a magnetic snap here underneath if you want to. But as I say, check your phone size first, because it does reduce the size of a phone you're able to put in there. So if you're adding one, just add it to the lining at this point. You can add it centrally just to the lining itself here, and you'd add the male part on the lining, and we'll add the female part afterwards. So if you're happy with that, we're now going to baste around the whole thing within the seam allowance. So ignore your top edge now, but if you can baste around the rest of it just to hold it in place. There we go. Trim as usual. That's fine. So we're ready to attach that to one of our front panels now. So take one of your front panels in outer, and that's piece A. So place your piece A right side up, and place your pocket piece also right side up on top, and line up all those outside edges and clip in place. So check on the back as well that it is thoroughly lined up. See, I've got a little piece not quite right there. I'm going to move that down a bit, because we want that to act basically as one total piece now. So now I'm going to baste around the whole of the outside again, just a few mil, 1/8 of an inch from the outside within the seam allowance. Make sure you keep that nice and flat, so hold it up while you're doing it, because if you sort of let it bend, it might pull away from the other side a little bit. So keep it nice and flat as you're stitching. And that's our front panel complete. Now if you did add the optional clasp on the lining, you can now add the female part of the clasp onto the body itself. So just mark the position on the main body fabric where the nipple of the male is landing, and then you can attach that through the outer itself. So that's our front panel complete. Let's have a look at our back panel. So let's grab our remaining outer body panel A. Now you'll also find in the pattern a piece K, which is a back overlay piece. You don't need to add that unless you're adding strap carriers. You can leave it completely blank, your back panel, or you can decorate it however you want. You can still put the overlay on, or you can do it in a feature fabric, or you can applique it, you can embroider it, add studs, anything you want to do. But as I say, if you want to add the strap carriers, this is a nice way to do it rather than having them sort of protruding from seams at the top, which is going to make your zip lumpy. So if you're adding your overlay piece and your strap carriers, grab your piece K and grab your strap carrier piece L. Now you'll notice there's two different pieces for whether you're using fabric or whether you're using a non-fraying fabric. So just choose whichever one you're using. If you're using the fabric, then follow the instructions in the written document. I'm going to do the non-fraying fabric version today. So take your strap carrier piece. I'm just going to make this into a wristlet today, so I'm just going to add one strap carrier. If you want to add two strap carriers, then you can use that method to add a crossbody strap afterwards. So I'm just going to top stitch down both sides of this. It's really just for looks rather than anything else. So I've just top stitched both long edges, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I'm going to thread on my 1/2 inch D-ring, and then I'll just secure that with another line of stitching close to the raw edge, the raw short edge. That'll hold it in place temporarily. You can add another line of stitching close up to the ring itself to hold it in place if you want to, or more lines of stitching just for effect on there. If you want to get really close up, you can leave a zipper foot on your machine to do that. So take your remaining outer body piece and your overlay piece K. If you're using fabric, follow those instructions. You're going to have folded in the sides. I'm going to position that on the body piece, so both are right sides up. I'm going to position that 4.5 centimeters or 1 3/4 inches from the top edge, but you'll find it comes in line with the sides. It's cut to fit. Just there, and clip that in place. And now I'm going to slip in the narrow raw edge of the strap carrier under the top edge of the overlay strip. I'm going to be able to catch it in there, and I want to position that 4 centimeters or 1 1/2 inches from the left hand edge of the body piece. So just measure that. I'm going to push it in about halfway just so I've got plenty of space to be able to catch it, but I don't want that ring anywhere near the top edge, so just make sure it's well away from that, because we don't want that getting in the way when we're putting our zip in. So you can clip or pin that in place somehow temporarily just while you get it to the machine. Add a second strap carrier in if you want to add a crossbody strap afterwards. And now I'm going to stitch both long edges of the overlay panel 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm also going to stitch in the sides at the same amount as well, so basically all the way around, just to secure it in place, and that'll catch in that strap carrier as we go over it too. Trim up. And now I'm going to stitch a second line. Again, it's just for looks as much as anything, but it'll also secure that strap in a little bit firmer. So I'm going to stitch another line of stitching about 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch from the first on both long sides. If you do struggle sewing over that little hump you've made, do have a look at my hump jumper video as well. That helps to go over bumps and lumps. I probably should have used one there. I can see my stitches have gone a little bit smaller, but it's fine. Trim up. Trimity trim. There we go. So that's our back panel complete too. As I say, you don't need to put that on unless you want to. You can decorate that however you choose. And by the way, we're putting the D-ring on at that side because that corresponds with our pocket opening side on the front. If we'd put it on the other, we'd be holding the wristlet that way up and the contents of your pocket would fall out. So you do want it on that side. So now I think it's time for a tea break. I know it's rather late in a project, but I thought it'd be a good break to talk about zips. So grab a brew and let's have a 2-minute chat about zips while we nibble something tasty, of course. I've chosen a good old British tea cake for our snack break today, purely because it's nice and round and plumptious and it looks a bit like our Curvalicious. It's biscuit and marshmallow with a yummy little jammy bit in the middle. I'll eat it at the end. Anyway, let's talk zips. You carry on eating while I waffle on a bit. If you're already familiar with adding zips on a curve, then you can just jump past all these tips. Feel free to attach it whichever way that suits you, but I know we're going to have lots of people that have never tried tackling a zip on a curve, so I just wanted to make sure that there was lots and lots of tips involved. So what makes a zip on a curve easier to sew in general? Well, in general, the larger the curve, the easier it is to attach the zip. So if you're making a really large bag, the curve's going to be a breeze. Here, we're going to curve a zip over quite a short distance. So I tried numerous depths of curve and decided on a long, almost domed shape for this pattern, rather than 2 sharp curved corners, to keep it as easy to control and easy to sew as possible. Use double-sided tape or pins inserted vertically, not horizontally, to stop the zip tape from curling inwards. Clips don't work as well for zips on a curve, as the zip kind of pulls away. It fights, it's trying to pull away from the edge of the fabric, and that's what we don't want. A narrower zip is actually easier than a wider zip too, but of course a number 5 zip is a lot more of a statement look than a number 3, so I've used number 5s on there, but you can use number 3. Finally, snipping the zip. Don't worry about snipping into the edge of zip tape. It's incredibly strong, and I'll show you a bit more on the zip tape itself afterwards. But just to illustrate the strength, take an old zip, make a little snip in it, and pull it. Give it a yank. It isn't that easy to rip. So, don't worry about it ruining your bags afterwards. Now, another thing that helps is having your zip open, because it makes that tape softer and more pliable to get round a curve. You can use a stiletto or your fingernail to help feel where the zip is underneath the curve, and again I'll show you more of that as we're going through the project. And if you are using a more economical zip, sometimes you'll find that the edges are a little bit wavy. So just run your iron down it, it'll shrink it back into shape as well before you start. So that's my general tips. Let's go again. Okay, so teacups down and off we go again, everybody. We're ready to prepare our main zip. So take your zip. Mine's a huge long one. I've said a 14-inch, but basically anything 14-inch or longer is fine. Make sure you've cut off any stoppers, and we're going to cut it to 13 inches. That's 33 centimetres exactly. So if I just measure that, 13 inches. I have actually marked the back already, so I'll just chop that. Save that piece for the next project. So you want nice straight edges on both sides, because we're going to attach our side panels to those. So grab your side panel pieces D And we'll put the lining pieces to one side for the moment. We're going to start with the outer pieces. Just to note that there is no interfacing on these pieces, whatever you've made them out of, because we're trying to keep the bulk down in the bottom seam corner, in the bottom corner of the wallet, and just keep as much bulk out of there as we can. So side panel pieces, you might want to call them zip tabs, but bear with me on this because they do end up as your side panels. So take your first side panel and place it right side down on top of the zip, which is right side up. So we're going to position it right over the end of the zip there, and we want the wider section of the side panel lining up with the short end of that zip. So you'll notice this end is narrower, so it's the wide end we're lining up with the zip end. So I'll clip that in place. So just make sure it's nice and straight and it's centered up here. I'm going to put an extra clip in. It just makes things easier when we flip it over in a minute. Turn it around and we'll do the same on the other side. So outer piece with the wide end to the short end of the zip. It's right sides together, so right side of zip and right side of fabric, and we'll just clip that in place. Make sure it's centered. I'm going to flip it over and attach the lining side to the wrong side of the zip. So we're repeating exactly the same thing, but on the reverse of the zip. So wrong side of the zip, take your first lining piece, place it right side down on top of the end, lining up that short edge with the wider edge of our side panel. Clip it in place, so you're clipping it exactly over the top of the other one with the zip in the middle. So just turn it over, make sure everything's still central. Yeah, turn it round, other side, right side down. There we go. So that's both sides. So I'm going to stitch across both ends with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Sometimes you'll find it easier to stitch across at the wrong side of the zip. There we go, so take your clips off, trim up, and now we're just going to flip those side panels back. If you are using a bulky-ish fabric, then it's worth trimming the fabric a little bit. So don't trim your zip, but you can trim away some of your fabric underneath, just at the corners. And then flip the side panels wrong sides together, so you can see the right side on both sides, and clip those in place. Should sit nicely on top of each other. You can press them if it's easier. Same on the other side, flip them wrong sides together. I've got a bit of tape sticking out on that side. Trim it off. So make sure they're nicely in line with the zip itself. If you've sewn your seam on an angle, then you'll find that your side panels go off on an angle, so just make sure it's nice and straight. Straighten it up if you need to. So I'm going to take those back to the machine now, and I'm going to stitch all the way around there, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So you won't see it on the sides and the bottom, but you will see that as a line of top stitch on the finished purse just at the top. Trim up any loose threads as usual. And there's our zip complete, ready to start applying to our wallet. Next, fold your zip in half. We just want to find the centre point. So fold it in half, matching your seams there at the ends of the zips, just in case you're at a different length. And we're just going to make a little snip very big, just about 1/8 of an inch deep, just to indicate our central point of the zip, and that will allow us to position it on the wallet correctly. Now, something else I just wanted to mention that you may find helpful when tackling a zip on a curve is, on a standard zip there's often a visible line on the zip tape approximately 6mm or 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Let me try and get a close-up of this. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but take a look at your own zip tape, and if it's a standard zip, there is normally a line where the zip changes weave direction. And basically what that does is it strengthens the zip, but it also gives a really handy line to stitch to. So there's the back. So I find it really useful, if you're new to this, to draw a line to make it really obvious on there. I'll do it on the pink one now. At this point, because that gives us a handy line to stitch to, but also to know where we're to know where we're snipping to, or not quite as far. So there's 6mm or 1/4 of an inch. You can just draw along there. Obviously, yes, I'm using a permanent marker here, but please do use a disappearing one. It is the back of the zip, you won't see it, but just in case. And it really does, if you're not used to it, it really does help, especially with the snip marks. So lay your zip the wrong side up so you can see the stitch line you just drew. So starting 2.5cm or 1 inch away from that centre snip. We want to start a ways away from it, because you want to be able to identify that central snip when we come to attach it to the wallet. So, and it's flat on the top anyway, so you don't need any snips. We're not going around a curve on that little bit. So starting about 1 inch or 2.5cm away, start snipping all the way along. So we want to snip not quite as far as the line. So if you imagine the line is going to be where you're going to sew to, well, that's your stitch line, so we don't want to snip quite as far as that, but we're going to snip all the way down. So less than 1/4 of an inch all the way to the end. Your zip is still bending really close to that side. So let's do it on the other side too. Just use a small pair of scissors. One side, let's do it on the other side too. Snippety snip, nearly done. There we go, all done. So I'm snipped all the way along, just leaving a little block in the middle that isn't, so I can see where my centre points are. In fact, you could always mark those centre points if you want to with a disappearing pen, just so you're absolutely sure where they are. So those snips are what are going to help us get around this curve with ease. So we're ready to start applying that. So grab your front panel with the pocket, identify your centre mark. I'll mark that on just so you can see it a little bit better there. It will be where your pocket crosses over, hopefully. Place it right side up, and we're going to attach double-sided tape all the way around the sides and top, curving it with the shape of the panel itself. We want narrow double-sided tape, 1/4 of an inch at most. You might even be able to find 1/8 of an inch. It has to be 1/4 of an inch and no more than that, because obviously your seam allowance is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So if you make it any bigger, if you use bigger tape, then you're going to be able to see it when you turn the zip over. So stick with your 1/4 inch. Starting at the bottom, I'm going to apply that all the way around. It doesn't have to be in one long piece, it can be in a number of pieces if you're struggling to get around the curve. But you need to keep it right on the edge of the fabric. So I'll show you that in a sec, but follow the line of the fabric edge all the way. You see, that's exactly on that outer edge. We don't want to bring it in because we want our zip tape to be exactly on the outer edge too. So keep sticking. And as I stressed previously, this is the way I do it. The way I find is going to be, or I think is going to be most useful for people who haven't tackled a zip on a curve before. There are lots of ways of attaching a zip on a curve, and this is just my method. So once you're happy that your tape is perfectly positioned, peel the remaining backing strip off, or strips if you've done it in a few bits. Grab your zip, and we want to lay the zip right side down on top of it with the zip pulled to the right when closed. So that's this way. I think I better check that because I'm upside down. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so identify your centre mark on the zip and your centre mark on your outer, which is there, just so you can see it. And I'm going to place that and position it exactly on that centre point. I'll stick a clip in just to be sure. And now I'm going to start working my way around from the centre point, matching up the zip tape, the top of the zip tape, with the edge of the outer. And you'll see that it will sort of, because you've got those snips in there, it will let you bend round, or bend the zip round. They just kind of open up to allow it. Just press, position, press, position. You'll have a little bit of overhang on this side. You will on the other side as well, and I've done that purposely just in case anybody might cut their zips a little bit short. I thought I'd better allow a little bit extra, so we'll cut that off shortly. So you can see how that has moulded almost to the curve, and you can see how helpful that double-sided tape is. If you're not using double-sided tape, obviously use pins, do not use clips because the zip will pull away as you're trying to stitch round. So pins will hold it in place, and there's no harm putting in an extra pin here and there too, just to make sure everything's very firm, because what we don't want this zip to do is move. So just to show you, if you're adding clips on fabric, if you're adding pins on fabric, as we discussed before, add them in vertically, like so that you can pull them out just as you get there. And even some people, I won't mention names, but some people will sew over them anyway. I've never broken a needle like that, but never say never. So you can see, it's just making sure you're holding it really, really firmly in place, because we need it to stay in line with the edge of that body fabric. So let's do the same on the other side. So I'm going to stand up for one. I'm going to just curve that round, mould it around, open those snips up as you go. So it's lying, the edge of the zip tape is lying exactly on the edge of the fabric. In fact, I should have said open your zip halfway as well, because you'll be able to see it better, and it makes the zip softer and curve easier. There we go. Make sure it's on the outer edge. I'll put a couple of clips in just to make sure my tape is not going to move anywhere. So you can see how nicely that is just opened up. You can see how it's matched exactly to the curve of the body fabric, and that's what's going to give us a nice curve. So if we then follow that stitch line we've drawn, we'll have a nice curved zip edge too. So we're now going to take that to the machine, and we're going to stitch around there with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. I didn't mention there, I forgot to mention that the notches on the side will match up with the top of those side panels too, so you can match those up. It will just follow around quite nicely though, so don't worry about that little bit of extra on the bottom. As long as you've got that top positioned correctly and you're following it round nicely right on the edge, it'll all fit in nicely. So let's stitch that. So make sure your zip is open halfway, and make sure you've done all your adjusting before you get to this point. So we're simply going to sew now. We don't want to be adjusting when we get to this point, so we're going to sew around with our zipper foot. That's a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's all the way around, including on the side panel. Take any pins out before you get to them. Follow that curve nicely round, just sweep it round. So you've done all the preparation before you get here. Lift your foot, move your zip puller or zipper pull, whichever way around. We're following that lovely stitch line that we drew on. So you're holding that zip tape down all the time. Hold that zip tape away. We don't want to catch the zipper teeth themselves in our seam. See how easy we're making it for ourselves by drawing that line on and sticking it all in place first. The hard work's done before we get to the machine. There we go, side one. Not too bad, was it? To make sure you're happy with that, turn it through just so you can have a look at your curves. Make sure you're happy with what you've done, and don't worry too much at the moment. We've still got the other side to put on. We've got time. We're going to go over that seam again anyway, so we can do some adjusting later if you want to. But I'm happy with that. Looking good. And you can see now that those side panels are slightly longer than your body panel, so this is the time to cut them off. So just open them out. I wouldn't fold them back on the body and do it that way because they tend to dip down. Just open them out and cut them off horizontally, just to the same line as your fabric, as your body piece. Bing, don't know where that went. That'll turn up later, won't it? Okay, so pop that zip back over, and now we're ready to add our first lining piece. So grab your lining panel with the zip coin pocket. Identify that center snip again, and now we're going to attach that to the other side of the zip. So we're still working on the zip side that we've just attached, and we're going to lay our lining piece directly on top of that. So we're going to make a zip sandwich. So that side of the zip is already attached. We're putting right side down. So you've got right side facing right side of outer and lining, and you've still got the free edge of the zip inside there. We're not working on that at all yet. We're just still on the same side, and clip that in the center. Open your zip halfway again if you haven't already. I haven't, obviously. And then we're going to clip or pin that all the way around. You can use double-sided tape, but actually once you've got that first side on, it's quite stable, so you can just clip. Yeah, pin or clip. Clips are actually fine here now because it's not really going to move that much, but feel free to use double-sided tape again. Make sure it's all in line on top of each other. Everything should fit okay. Make sure this zip tape is well out of the way. So on this side you've got two sides of the zip. You can push that one out of the way, the open side. Make sure this zipper tape is pushed down well out of the way. We want to be attaching exactly over the seam we already stitched, and we don't want any zip teeth getting in the way of that. So keep it pushed back. The other side now, push that tape in. Clip or pin on top. And do make sure that the bottom edges line up exactly. So you want the outer and the lining bottom edges all finishing directly on there at the same place. But they should, as you've cut them from the same pattern piece. There we go. So that's all clipped. Now we're going to stitch from the other side so we can see our existing line of stitching. So turn it over and you'll see where you've stitched already. So we're going to stitch exactly over that line. I'm going to put a couple of pins in there as well, just to make sure my zip doesn't curl inside, because one of the main problems is that when you're sewing along, you can see this zip tape tries to push back and it curls in towards your seam. So you just have to feel your way along and making sure that it doesn't actually curl in anywhere. And if you're using fabric, then you can stick a couple of clips or a couple of pins in actually outside the seam allowance. I shouldn't on this, but you can see that's actually holding that well back out of the way as well. So totally up to you for this second side. Pins or clips. Pins are preferable because you can hold the zip tape back and you don't have to take them off. I just tend to throw a couple in at the corners really, where that zip tape will start to fight you a little bit. And as I say, yes, I'm not using them vertically. I should be using them vertically as well. But there we go. That'll do on this. So now we're ready to stitch that side on. So I'm going to follow the exact line that I stitched previously. If you stitch on the outside of that line, you'll see the stitch line when you turn it through. So you don't want to stitch within the seam allowance. You want to stitch exactly on the line you already stitched or marginally inside it onto the body. So all the way around. So your tips for this section are to sew with your outer on top so you can still see your stitch line. Go slow and feel your way along with your nail or with a sewing stiletto, making sure that the zip teeth and the other side of the zipper are pushed well out of the way. They tend to try and curl in at this point. And remember, you can only do it efficiently with your tongue out. So here goes. Remember, you've done all the preparation, so you've done the hard work. So this, in theory, should be nice and easy. So take that pin out, feel your way around there. You can feel where the zipper is inside with your nail or with a stiletto. Push it in if you need to. Feel my zip puller in there. I'll leave that a little bit out of the way first. That way. Move my zip back to the other side. There's no problem, you know, if you want to just stop, do a back stitch, take it off, move the zip and put it back in again. That's absolutely fine too. Feel where that zip is, make sure it's out of the way. You can also put your hand inside and pull it down. I can feel the pocket coming up here, so you get a little ridge across now. Make sure that zip tape is out of the way. Keep stitching over the existing line. Make sure the zip is well down as you go around the curve. You don't want it in the way anywhere. You can feel inside where it is. Yeah, all fine. Obviously I'm going over the top here, it's a lot easier than that. I just want you to have every tip going. You can see the shape of the zip underneath there. And back stitch. So there we are. We've stitched over the existing line. I've got a little bobble there. I'm going to go back and just redo that. But let's have a look inside, see what we're looking like. It might not make a difference. But if you do make a little skew as you go in, it's easy to go back in and just do a little line of stitching to straighten it up. Turn it through. And then you can go and give that a press. And it's looking fine. That's where my little bobble was. I'll probably go back in and do that, but otherwise, absolutely fine. So that's one side done. Turn it back through because we need to trim that side panel down. If you're using a really bulky outer fabric, you can actually trim your outer fabric all the way down by half. I mean, this will be fine. But we do need to trim down the side panels. So where the side panels start, just trim that seam down by half and really make sure you're tight in at the bottom. As I say, the point where we get all the bulk on this pattern is that bottom seam just here. So make sure you're trimming all the time. You can grade your seams just by trimming maybe the outer and leaving some of the lining. So do the same on both sides. Just going down the side panel and into that bottom corner. Grade the seams, trim off a tiny bit, just close to your seam. Obviously don't cross over your seam, leave that all intact, but nice and tight in. Fantastic, so that's one side done. So we're going to turn that through. Take that to the iron board, and if you haven't already, give it a nice press. And we're ready to apply the other side. So there we go. Yep, that's great. So turn it so your zip is sticking upwards again. And let's grab our other outer panel. So we're ready to attach our back body panel now. So I've gone ahead and I've put my double-sided tape all around that body panel again. So that's my remaining body panel, and I'm going to peel off. Lovely, very satisfying. And now take your completed section with the zip already attached and place it with the right sides of the outer facing. So we're lining up the free edge again of the zipper tape. So the one we haven't stitched so far. And find your centre point on the outer. So right sides together, so you'll see the lining on top. And match your centre point there. Just stick a clip in it just so it doesn't move. I'm going to go right round and I'm going to match that bottom corner first before I do anything. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, because we need those to match up exactly. You can also match your side panels and the side notch. Just use clips for now, same on the other side. And then just as we did on the previous side, we're going to go around and we're going to stick that zip tape onto the sticky tape, and we're going to match exactly the line of the outer edge with the outer edge of the zip tape. See how those little snippety snips just allow me to open up that zip and follow that curve. It's a little bit fiddlier this side because you've got the weight of the first side, but it's absolutely fine. There we go. So that's that side stuck on. Again, I'm going to put a couple of clips in for now just so it doesn't move while I'm doing the other side. Matching the free edge of the zip tape, the edge of it exactly with the edge of the fabric is what is going to give you a nice smooth curve. Get my finger in there. Couple of clips just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Again, flip it over. You see I've got a little bit of tape sticking out the top there, so I want to go back and just adjust that so it's exactly on the edge of the fabric. There we are. And then we're ready to stitch this side now. So we'll stitch from the zip side. So you can see we're going to stitch at 6mm again, or 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to stay on that line that we drew just as we did with the other side. Make sure, by the way, on this side you have got that little D-ring in there, so make sure that's pushed down so it's not going to get stuck in your zip tape anyway. It shouldn't really reach, but just in case. Follow that line round. Move my zip out of the way. Again, you can stop, take the needle out if you want to, if you feel you haven't got enough room. Have you ever done that thing where you wish you had a third hand so you could actually lift that presser foot up the extra bit to get it past? Okay, and on we go. So that's our third side of 3 stitched. Brilliant. Make sure that zip is half open still. And if you're ready, we'll put the final side on. So grab your lining piece with the credit card slots. And we're going to lay that right side down on top of the lining side. And you should be able to just match that up, match your centre points, and match your bottom edges first. You will have to pull it one way a little bit and then the other way a little bit, but obviously it's exactly the same size, so it should fit fine. Oh, I didn't trim. Can I bear to leave that? No. So then just go around matching and clipping, so you know you've got it in the right place. Push that other side of the zip out of the way on the half that's open. Make sure your zip tape is pushed down so your teeth aren't going to get up into your seam anywhere. So do all this twiddling before you get to the sewing machine. As I say, it's too late when you get to the sewing machine. Do it now, make your life easy, and then you don't really have to do much when you get to the machine. On this side where the zip is closed, just make sure it's pulled down nicely so your zipper tape is not going to get into, or sorry, your zip teeth are not getting into that seam anywhere, and the zip is not curling up. So there we go, everything's done beforehand again. Right, so we'll flip it over and we're going to stitch on top of that same line again that we already stitched. I'm going to put a couple of pins in at the corners because this is the sticky bit, just these curves where we really are going round a bit of a tight bend. And really it's not to hold the fabric together here, this is to hold the zip teeth back inside, because that's what's going to fight you to get back up there. So a couple of pins will do no harm in those corners. I shouldn't be using them on waterproof canvas. It's fine on the front of this actually, it's just the backing, it makes holes in the backing, but I don't think I'll be going out in the rain with it really. Make sure it's pulled out of the way. There we go. And we're ready to stitch again. So take that to the machine, and again we're going to stitch exactly over that line we already stitched, or just fractionally inside it, not outside. We don't want to see the stitches afterwards. Use your stiletto or your fingernail just to make sure that those zip teeth are down. They do like to try and creep in. You can put your hand inside as well and pull them out of the way. Just make sure your fingers are out of the way again before you start stitching. Move your zip puller back. If you can find it. Is it in the bottom one, I think? Press a foot up. No, it's not. It's in that top one, isn't it? In fact, definitely on this one it would be easier to go in and stop and move it. There we go, I've done it anyway. Back down, carry on. Feel your way with your fingernail. side when you get to this last corner. You can always push it over a little bit, which helps. So there we are. That's all of them done. You can rest now. Breathe. I know I've overdone it on the tips really, but do you know what? If you haven't done a zip or a curve before, I thought it's better to do too much than too little. So each curve zip you do now is going to be easier every time. So the only thing we've got to do now is snip our bottom edges. So just there where our side panels are. So we're going to trim those down by half. Make sure we get tight into that bottom seam. Same on the other side. And hopefully that's looking rather nice. Again, if you're using a really bulky fabric, you can trim the outer fabric back too. But don't trim the zip. But again, we should be fine here. So we're ready. Let's turn that through. And hopefully you've got a nice curved zip. Yep, that's looking very good. Happy with that. So off to the ironing board and give that a really nice press. Ready for closing up the bottom. So we're nearly there. Just a quick point to note is that on the side panels they will taper towards the bottom, and that's right. You can see the wider at the top, they will be coming in towards the bottom, and that's correct. So let's give that a nice press. So I've given our Curvalicious a press. Now open up the top zip and open up your coin pocket zip inside. Very important that, because you're going to really struggle otherwise to turn it through. So now we're ready to close up the bottom. Now turn the whole thing inside out so that the lining is facing lining and outer is facing outer, and the coin pocket is visible on top. So if you just put your hand into the side that has the coin pocket and turn it that way through, it's just because we want that on the outside so we can turn it through easily. So you've got a pin in there at the moment. Tear that out. Just till you get it organised. You can still pin that out of the way again, it won't do any harm. I'll push it up out of the way. So now we want to stitch our bottom edge and close our wallet up. So we want to clip all the way around the bottom, lining to lining and outer to outer. So find your notches on your lining and match those central notches. So clip those at your central point. Flip over and outer to outer. Match those central notches and clip. And then we'll just move around to the side panels. And we want to push our seams towards the lining. So the seam allowances want to go towards the lining side. The little panel in the middle, the tiny panel that's left, that should fold in half and fold in towards the outer. And then we're going to clip that in place. Swivel it round, same on the other side. So our seam allowances we want towards the lining, and the little panel folds in half and pushes towards the outer. Clip that in place. And then we want to clip the rest of the circle. So clip all the way around. Should all fit nicely. So we don't need to leave a turning gap, obviously, because we've got the bottom of that pocket open that we're going to be able to turn it through. And now we're ready to stitch that. And we'll use a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. I tend to find it easier to stitch from the inside of the wallet, so the bulk is curving over the top of the machine, but you can do it either way. You could use the flatbed of your machine and have the wallet running around it. So whichever you find easier. The seam allowance, as I say, is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch all the way around, but to avoid bagginess in the lining, take a fraction more than that on the lining, just 1/8 of an inch more on the lining and 1/8 of an inch less on the outer. You don't have to, but you'll find that that will help to avoid any bagginess in the lining. You can draw it on if it helps. Be careful when you go over your side panels not to narrow the seam allowance, that's quite important too. So let's stitch that. Just twist it around as you get to the side seams. If you are using a really bulky fabric, you might find it easier to stitch from the outside. Don't narrow your seam allowances as you go over the side panels. So there we are, stitched in place. Trim any last threads. Now we want to just trim back this bottom seam by half all the way around. Snip away as much bulk as possible, particularly at the bottom corners, and again particularly if you're using thicker fabrics. The more you can chop into there, it's not taking any strain on these corners when we turn it through, so don't worry, you know, get quite close up to there. Nice and close in at those side seams. Just going into those side seams again, just to make double sure that I have clipped plenty off. I've just left about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch there, 6mm. And then we're ready for the moment of truth. Remove any pins if you have still got some in the pocket, and then we're going to turn that through, and I hope you left that zip open inside. Drum roll stage. Don't poke anything sharp in the corners, just get your finger in there. So do the outer first, put your finger in those side seams and push them out. There we go, and then bottom edge down, and then we can push the lining in. So I'm going to take that to the ironing board and give it a really nice press, and then we'll take a look at it. So there we are, there's my wallet pressed. Really happy with that. Now at this point you can decide whether you want to slip in a piece of Deckerbill, Deckerbill heavy. I don't think it needs it, because once you get your credit cards inside, it really firms the wallet up. So actually it does the job for you, because you're going to use that full of credit cards anyway. I've got a passport in there, but you can see it doesn't bend once you've got your credit cards in there anyway. So you can, as I say, put some Deckerbill heavy into there. Just cut it to the original outer size pattern pieces, less the seam allowances, and then you're going to have to push it in through the zip pocket. It's a bit of a wrestle, but you can do it. As I say, I'm quite happy with that as it is. And now the only thing left to do is to close up the wallet. So I'm going to pull out that coin pocket inside and clip the edge together. It's folded in already, you pressed that earlier, so you should be able to get a nice edge on there. Clip in place, and I'm now going to stitch that 1/8 of an inch or 3mm from the edge just to secure. The final trim. There we go, push that inside the wallet without making all that clanky zip noise. Zip up. And you're finished. Your wallet is complete. Push the lining back inside and give it a really good press. Fill it with cards, keys, passports and cash, maybe even the odd chocky bicky, and enjoy. If you added the D-rings earlier, you can now choose to add a wrist or crossbody strap. Just check the written instructions for details of making those up. Do join the Facebook group for help to show pics of your creations and just general bag making chat. The link's in the text below the video, or share your pictures on Instagram with the hashtag SpencerOg. Find more of my patterns and bag making hardware at www.spencerog.com. That is a mouthful. For regular free bag making tutorials, do subscribe to my YouTube channel while you're on here. And for links to products used in the video, again, just check the text below the video. I hope you enjoyed making the wallet with me today. Why not make a few more? Add an exciting print, a few rivets, or even an embroidery. What are you waiting for? Go sew!